Good afternoon. Again, this is Ross Heron from Payroll HQ. Thank you so much for joining us for this short Learning Lab session brought to you by Payroll HQ. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Caitlin McMahon from Perform HR. Just to give you a bit of an introduction to Perform HR, they're an outsourced HR provider with a team of expert consultants located across Sydney, Newcastle, Brisbane and Perth. They provide entrepreneurial thinking with a solid HR know-how, enabling leaders to get on and lead. Now, Caitlin, our guest speaker for today, is a forward-thinking, purpose-driven leader. She has extensive experience in facilitating employee-led change programs with a focus on continuous improvement that makes sense for the business. Her core strengths lay in people strategy development, culture change, building leadership capability, and employee engagement. Caitlin prides herself on being a true business partner that helps her clients achieve their strategic goals. And in today's session, Caitlin will explore with us the topic of HR alignment to business strategy and culture. Welcome, Caitlin.
Thanks, Ross. That introduction was really great, and I just wanted to add that my background is in organisational development. So connecting people to purpose is my passion, and I'm honoured to share my ideas with you all today. So working with my clients, something that I often hear is people say that they can't plan their day, that things come up. There's no forward thinking, things just pop up. And I'm wondering if that sounds familiar to any of you. So there's always going to be an unpredictable element to HR, and that's okay as long as the whole HR function doesn't turn into a game of whack-a-mole. And what I mean by that is putting out spot fires. So doing that reactive work. When we are reactive, we can't take time to think about our long-term goals. We get stuck in the immediate and the transactional. We focus on how we're going to deal with that individual, that team, rather than what we need to do as an organisation. And this has a huge impact on culture. When our attention is on those few noisy employees who might be resistant, argumentative, aggressive, they have behaviours of blaming others and justifying their behaviours. Motivation and productivity will tend to go down with your quiet employees. If we have a look at Gallup and their research into engagement, they've shown that highly engaged teams outperform low engaged teams with 25% lower turnover in high turnover organisations and 65% lower turnover in low turnover organisations. So that's a huge impact to just the turnover of people based on how engaged they are. So by focusing on those noisy few, you might lose some of your good employees. So how do we lift the lid on the game and get a bigger picture of what we need to be addressing? Today, so we're going to have a look over the next 20 minutes or so about looking into HR alignment to business strategy and culture. We'll also look at a design thinking model for getting clarity on people's strategy, and we'll also touch on resourcing your people's strategy for success. So if you haven't seen the TED Talk, I highly recommend it. But Simon Sinek says that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And the same goes for employees. Employees who are connected with an inner purpose are more fulfilled, more passionate, and more invested in the success of their organisation. Think about your own mission and values. Do employees connect what they do day to day to the mission of your organisation? Is it clear to them how they contribute? At Perform HR, our mission is to change the way HR is done. And we use that as a filtering question with our clients. we ask ourselves in every piece of work that we do, every proposal that we put forward, how is this changing the way HR is done? And that makes sure that we continue to innovate and think outside the square. By defining a people strategy, you can help connect people to the overall mission of your business. They'll feel more fulfilled in their roles and they can see that they are making meaningful progress. So, how do we translate organisational goals into a people strategy? We can use the same why, how, what model from Simon Sinek to look at formulating our people strategy. The organisational objectives then become design principles for our people strategy. If what we need to do doesn't align to our business objectives, then it doesn't fit in the strategy. So is there a tool that we can use to define our people strategy? So the answer is yes, and this is something that I use myself and we use at Perform HR all the time. So we use design thinking for strategy development. Design thinking is traditionally about co-designing a solution with the customer. It's about customer-centered design. If you know anything about Agile and that way of working, it's all about working with the end user or the customer to design something that's meaningful to them. But it's also a useful tool in designing what we are going to do and why we are going to do it, because it's easy to jump straight to solutions. So design thinking helps us to get clear on the vision and stay focused on the why. So the organisational mission, drivers and values are critical for staying focused on the why. And my best tip for using design thinking for strategy development is to get the right people in the room. So you know your people best, but where are you trying to get to with this? Who is right to have in the room? Is it the HR team that you need in the room? Is it the executive? Do you need leaders or employees, a cross-section from across the organisation? You know your people best, but you need the right people in the room to get the best out of this process. So to give you a basic rundown of the process, it's about getting clear on the current reality. So the key question there is, where are we now? And this sets up what's the burning platform, what's the need for change. And then we can get clear on the desired future, so where we want to be. And getting clear on the current reality and the desired future helps us to formulate these design principles. So if we think about our mission and our values, they might form part of those design principles when we're looking at our strategy, because the design principles are something that you want to meet them, and at the very least you don't want to contradict them. So it just helps you get focused on where you're headed. Then we can move to ideas. So like I said before, it's easy to jump straight to solutions, but we need to get clear on that current reality and desired future first. So this is about what's our best idea. And we want to encourage, so diverge before we converge. So encourage creative thinking, get all of the ideas on the table. If you've got the right people in the room, you will get, you'll get so much more out of this idea generation, and you'll be able to formulate the best idea. And then it's about putting that into action. So how do we make it happen? Who will do what by when? And it's a very basic process, but it helps you get really, really clear on what you're trying to achieve. So let's take a practical example. If we look at the company Widgets R Us, this is loosely based on a true story. So this is based on a client that I've worked with. So if you think about a heavy industry manufacturer, if we look at their what their current reality was, their mission was to provide quality support widgets to protect people. So they built these products that needed to protect people in the work that they did. And to give you a bit of context there, it was underground work. So there was a huge safety risk to the products that they were making. They were also introducing lean manufacturing. So that was a huge change, transformation in the way that they did their work. And it gave them some key pillars or key drivers in what they were focusing on. So those were safety, quality, delivery and profitability. They also had newly defined company values, which weren't yet rolled out through the business. Their safety incidents were high. They were having lots of and frequent safety incidents and lots of injuries. But not only that, their product failure was also high, which was such a huge risk to the business because their products were designed to protect people. So this was a massive issue for them. They also had siloed departments, so people operating in, focusing on what they came to do for the day and not thinking about how that impacts on other departments or what we're trying to achieve collectively. And they had also done an engagement survey, and some of the feedback that had come back in that was people didn't know what was going on in the business. There was all this change happening, and people didn't feel educated on that. And people also didn't have an understanding of the products that they were making. They just came in, made their product, and went home. They didn't understand what the product was for. So this was causing a lot of reactive performance issues to be dealt with. If we think about the putting out the spot fires, there's a lot of spot fires to be put out with this one, addressing all of these incidents. So if we then move to look at what the desired future at Widgets R Us was, it was, if we think about the purpose of their people strategy, was to enable our employees to provide those quality support products to protect people. They also needed people to have an understanding of what lean manufacturing was, why we were doing it, and what it meant, and what those key drivers for success were. They needed people to have an understanding and a connection to the new company values. They wanted to lower their safety incidents, lower their product failure, and build collaboration across teams, increase communication, and build understanding of their products. So this is a simplified version of what the people strategy ended up looking like at Widgets R Us. So if we think about the why, what, how, we've got the purpose across the top, the objectives through the middle, and the action plan at the bottom. So obviously it doesn't have the detail there, but it's just to give you an idea of what we were trying to achieve. So the purpose remained as we want to enable our employees to provide quality support widgets to protect people. And then we had these key objectives through the middle. And for each of those, there was certain actions that we were taking that would help us achieve that objective, which would ultimately help us achieve our purpose. So if we look at the first one, it's to build understanding of our mission and values. And some of the activities that we did in that space was a CEO roadshow, so sharing company updates and what the business was about and what our new values were and why, and how we could change our behaviour, I guess, to meet those. We also looked at the performance review, the structure of the performance reviews, and looked at how can we change up the questions that we're asking at performance review times and in these one-on-one check-ins to relate directly back to what we're trying to achieve and instill those key behavioural things in terms of their company values. And we also introduce some company awards. So at some of the company events, we would put behaviour-based and values-based awards in place. So rewarding people for the right behaviours. So by doing all of that, you start to instill a mindset and behaviour that you want to see in all of your employees. So if we look across to objectives 2 and 3, it was to build understanding of the lean transformation and build product awareness. So to address this, we introduced a learning and development program for employees. And that was centered around what is lean, why are we doing it, how does it impact me in my position, and what are these products? How does the consumer use these products, and why is it important for me to get the quality right when I'm making this product in the factory so that it does protect people, at the other side. if we look at objective number 4, there's that was to break down the silos between departments. So some of the things that we did there was to make the, if you know anything about lean manufacturing, they have what they call lean boards. So it's about sharing company information. So sharing the objectives and what each department is working on, and getting clarity of how my work impacts on another team. So just sharing that information, and also co-location. So this was a huge one, and it had a really big impact. So just simply physically locating teams that need to work closely together in the same space, so that they can, reduce time it takes to talk to other teams, get answers on what they need, to answer questions for their customers and get sales across the line. So they could literally just turn around to someone and ask that question, get it answered on the spot. So then if we look at objective 5, introducing formal and regular communication channels. So they didn't have any sort of formal communication in the business at all. So we introduced a company newsletter to share both company insights, which also lends to objective number 1, and also sharing stories about each other. So that also helps to break down the silos between departments as well, getting to know other people that we're working with. And also they introduce their all staff meetings. So again, building understanding of where we're at and where we're headed with the company, and how your team and your role fits into that picture. So if we think about what was the outcomes of implementing these projects at Widgets R Us, we were now proactively addressing systemic issues, not solely focusing on individual performance management. And we were investing in people to get better outcomes in safety and product quality. So if I again refer back to Gallup statistics, so highly engaged teams far outperform low engaged teams. So if we look at profitability, they outperform low performing teams by 22%. We look at productivity, it's by 21%. Safety is by 41%. And quality defects is also by 41%. So that's huge, a huge difference in performance between high performing and low performing teams in terms of their engagement. So higher employee engagement, so we get higher employee engagement as their work is more meaningful, leading to better delivery and profitability outcomes. So they also were achieving their lean focus areas. They were living their mission. They were able to move away from their spot fire reactive approach. So it was implementing this strategy was good for business overall, and it helped them to get closer to their desired future. So I hear you. This is all great, but how can we get off the hamster wheel of the reactive space to think strategically? So this is where I want to talk to you about resourcing your people's strategy and why it's important for success. So it's all well and good to have a strategy in place, but you need to create the space for it to happen. So if we look at the Dave Ulrich model of HR, he says that there's an element of strategic or future-focused work that needs to happen. There's also an element of operation and day-to-day focus that needs to happen on that vertical axis. And across the horizontal, there's an element of people, and there's an element of process to the nature of the work that is done in HR. So one person is going to find it very difficult to focus on both the noisy stuff, the operational stuff, as well as find the space to think strategically. So it might not be feasible for you to invest in a large HR team, but you can get creative about how you do it. So can you leverage off capability that's already within your organisation? Can you reallocate work? Can you recruit? Can you outsource so that you can focus on your core business? If you want to achieve the outcomes you want to see, so if you think about that desired future that you want to see in your business, you need to take action and find a way to put your people's strategy in place. Otherwise, you'll be forever stuck in the reactionary whack-a-mole environment. So I'm going to leave you with a question. What's your people strategy? So think about your current reality and your desired future. How are you bridging the gap for your people? So that's all from me. And I've left you with a question. So is there any questions for me?
And if there are any questions, thank you, Caitlin, please feel free to ask them in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And we will do our very best to either get them answered live, or we will come back to you with responses from Caitlin if we're not able to. Just while you're maybe having a quick think about a question to ask, I have got a question for you, Caitlin, if that's okay. Mm-hmm. And it really is born out of my own experiences working within, I guess, corporate environments, where I've participated and been involved in, the design and pulling together of a business strategy, both kind of short term and longer term. And this question really sprung into mind on one of your slides when it talked about siloed departments, because what I've seen is that when the business strategy is pulled together, and there'll be a strategy around, how we achieve accelerated top line growth, for example, and that generally sits with the sales director, and then there'll be one around, maximizing profitability or gaining efficiencies, and that might sit with finance and service excellence. That'll sit with delivery, for example. So I see strategies being carved up and then siloed out into, functional departments. And then, you end up with something like employee engagement sitting with people and culture in HR, but it doesn't really ever seem to come, together. Is that the norm?
Is it the norm? So is it the desired norm? I would say no. Yeah. But unfortunately, we do see it in a lot of businesses. And what I would say about that is, and in my experience, there's usually a lack of a unified vision or a common goal between each of the teams. So yes, someone at the top has formulated a strategy, but then when it's filtered down to those different teams, it hasn't stayed connected. And if we think about those design principles, there isn't that common goal linking it all back together. So another piece that I would say is, are the incentives right? So what gets measured gets done, right? Yes. So are we rewarding people for the right behaviour? And is the strategy that we have cascaded down to people, is that conducive to achieving our overall goals, or are we setting up competition between departments? And if we have any bonus structures or any sort of incentive scheme, is that rewarding the right behaviours as well? Is that linked to our common goal and our unified vision? Or again, are we creating those siloed teams and that competition? The classic one is sales versus operations, I guess. People trying to develop product, and another team trying to sell and push a product, and operations can't keep up with actual production of it. So there's this disconnect between what they're doing. So if there is collaboration and communication between those teams, and there's a unified vision or a common goal between them, that's less likely to happen and less likely to create those siloed departments.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm just going to check if we've got any questions online. We don't at present. I'll just ask one more, if I'll just be cheeky enough to. With regards to people strategies and the clients that you're working with at the moment, how topical is reskilling?
Reskilling.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting one. I'm working with a couple of different clients at the moment that we're looking at developing skills matrix across the organisation, and looking at restructuring the business, and finding more efficient and effective ways for how we do our work. And that whole part of it is looking at, well, what skills do we already have in the team, and where are our gaps in terms of to meet this this new world that we're going to be working in, this different structure. What are our gaps there? So I guess reskilling is quite topical in that sense, but also it's topical in if we think about automation. So it's topical in the sense that we need to think about the people that we have in particular roles and the particular skills that they have. Are those skills transferable if those roles were to be made redundant? And what other businesses, industries, roles could those people go into, or do we need to retrain and reskill people so that they are still effective in the workforce if we do need to automate and make people redundant in terms of getting more efficiencies out of our business? So yes, I would say it's really topical.
Thank you very much. We don't have any questions sitting within our Q&A section. I will just pause for a moment, and then I will bring today's Learning Lab session to a close. So thank you, Caitlin. Thank you for everybody who has attended the session and given us 30 minutes of your time. It's greatly appreciated. This session has been recorded, and the recording will be shared probably within the next 24 hours, as will the slide deck. There will also be information about how to connect with Caitlin directly. But if there is anything that springs to mind following the closure of this call, feel free to flick me through an email, and I'm happy to get that through to Caitlin ASAP. Again, thank you, and we look forward to seeing you all, not seeing you all, but virtually, if you know what I mean, at the next Payroll HQ Learning Lab session. And special thank you to Caitlin for your time today. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Ross.